This is Oren, and I am going to talk about the Western genre and my continued picks 5 through 1 of the top 10 Westerns of all time. Jean Renoir, the French filmmaker, said, "The marvelous thing about Westerns is that they're all the same movie. This gives a director unlimited freedom." I just happen to know that quote off the top of my head. No, seriously, it's actually a book quote I'm doing here. But that is very true of this genre. Like a lot of genres, the rules are generally the same. They generally revolve around a certain transitory period in time, and that's based in history, and a gunslinging character, or a band of gunslinging characters. And there are generally two different differentiations. There's the outlaw western, the professional western, and the law and order western. And the law and order one is where the conflict is between chaos and law and order, the settling of the West, where there's a gunslinger who is guided by a sense of right and wrong, and there's also a gunslinger and then the professional is the gunslinger who is just doing it for pay. Sometimes the professional gunslinger gets glamorized, like in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and sometimes the professional is given a darker tone, like the Clint Eastwood series, The Man with No Name, if I'm not mistaken. But The Magnificent Seven is a great 1960 film that straddles these two genres. It's about 7 guys who join forces together to defend a town that's helpless from a large industrial force. They're kind of doing it for pay, but they're only doing it for $20 if I'm not mistaken. So it's generally a sense of honor that's guiding them. The Magnificent Seven was directed by John Sturges, who's most well known for The Great Escape, which starred Steve McQueen in a bigger role. Steve McQueen is one of the people here. And like Magnificent Seven and The Great Escape, this film, both these films are about just a bunch of guys getting together with a lot of different characteristics and different backstories, and just teaming up to do something awesome. And John Sturges was attracted to a lot of male genres. He did war films, he did Bad Day at Black Rock, he also did The Gunfight at the OK Corral, so he kind of liked a lot of this stuff. Some people might not say he put a lot of females in his films, but in the case of the Westerns, a lot of the females weren't given great parts. And it's probably historically accurate. There weren't a lot of female gunfighters, as far as I know, so perhaps it might have been pretty good. Let's look at some clips from the Magnificent Seven. Let's look at the preview, rather. By the way, The Magnificent Seven has an amazing theme, which is why I was very disturbed to look at the trailer here and see that they created this insipid song for the trailer. A lot of Westerns, like Gunfight at the OK Corral or High Noon, have a theme song at the start of the film, but this insipid thing that you're hearing doesn't actually exist anywhere in the movie. Let's move on to my number 4 film. So this is Yul Brynner, the great Yul Brynner. He was best known for The King and I and Westworld, not the TV show. James Coburn, that wiry guy, is in it. Charles Bronson's in it. Eli Wallach is in the film as well. Eli Wallach, see, there you go. It's the Yul Brynner. He's top billed over Steve McQueen because he's earlier than Steve McQueen in this film. There's Eli Wallach. He's doing a little bit of blackface, so I guess might not be as PC these days. He's doing a blue brown face, I guess, because he was definitely a Caucasian actor. Let's go to Wild Bunch. That's my number 4 film. The Wild Bunch came out in 1969. It's by Sam Peckinpah, who was well known as his nickname was Sam Bloody Peckinpah. He definitely inspired Quentin Tarantino, among other people, with his great use of gore in his films. This is a film that expands on the theme of the transitory nature of the West, because it's about Westerners in the last days of the West. they're professionals, and a lot of Westerners live by a certain code that's celebrated in these films. A lot of times in the professional Western, the Westerner doesn't know how to live outside of this code. So in this case, as the U.S. is being tamed, and they don't have much, see, there's more blood and guts and stuff, it's wonderful. As the U.S. is being tamed, these outlaws in particular go to Mexico. This is a film, you can see it's shot with much more gritty realism. You can see it's a lot of California doubling here, right? You know, this definitely doesn't look like the Mexican desert so much as it looks like the California mountainside. And this is, see again, there's a nice, you know, little theme song. This film also has an all-star cast. William Holden's in it. It actually has 4 Oscar-winning actors in it. William Holden, Ernest Borgnine, Ben Johnson, and Edmund O'Brien have all won Oscars at one point or another. William Holden is actually... He's very well known for Sunset Boulevard, which if you look it up is 1950. And he's also known for Network, which is 1976. So he's had a very long career. Ernest Borgnine lived to at least the 2010 somewhere along the line. He lived to be 95 or maybe even slightly older. But one last thing I want to say about this film is that perhaps what makes the film The Wild Bunch so memorable is that it's a film about outlaws determined to remain outlaws, but somewhere over the course of the film, and spoiler alert, they sort of grow a heart, a sense of wrong and right, and they decide to put their lives on the line for the right thing. And see, these are some of these old actors. Robert Ryan is also in the film, who actually worked with John Sturges in, I can't remember which film it was. Alright, now let's talk about my number 3 film. Suddenly it was, let's talk about my number 3 film, which is Stagecoach. This is the earliest film on my list, and it's actually the earliest major Western in the era of spoken films, which was 1927 onwards. Why? Because for the start of the sound era, musicals, gangster films, screwball comedies, those things were really popular, adaptations of literary novels, but the studio heads felt that Westerns would be too expensive to shoot. They were very popular in the silent era. Actually, the very first feature-length movie, The Great Train Robbery of 1903, was a Western. John Ford shot Westerns in the silent era. He shot films like The Hurricane, Look Who's Talking, which is a bit of a screwball comedy, and The Informant, which, if I'm not mistaken, was a pro-labor film in the 1930s. Then he decided that he could shoot a Western for cheap. And he convinced, I believe it was Paramount? I don't know, maybe 26th Century Fox. Don't worry, that guy doesn't die. I've seen the whole movie to the end. He's not a goner just yet. To shoot a film that's essentially a bit of a downstairs, upstairs, like a Downton Abbey or a Grand Hotel type film, where it's different parts of society merging in one kind of room, one kind of dinner party, if you will. In this case, it is a stagecoach. So there are, if I'm not mistaken, there's something like 8 or 9 cast members throughout the whole movie, other than these kind of Indian extras. And there are 2 drivers and 7 people in the stagecoach, including people who are various statuses in society, and people who, whether respected or not respected, rich or poor, malicious in their trade, or like a whiskey drummer or a banker, or honorable in their trade. There is a prostitute played by Claire Trevor, a town drunk played by Thomas Mitchell, and there is a outlaw played by John Wayne. And this is John Wayne's big starring role, by the way. This is his breakout role. He was a golf buddy of director John Ford. And they redeem themselves over the course of their journey, even though they're lower status within the little mini society of the stagecoach. A lot of this was shot on Monument Valley, Utah / Arizona, right along that border, and there is not a lot of, as you are seeing a gunfight scene right here. That's Thomas Mitchell in the middle, I believe he won an Oscar for this film in the supporting actor category. There's not a lot of... You're seeing a fighting scene, but there actually is very little fighting in this movie. John Ford would work his way up towards much more elaborate gun scenes. And there's John Wayne over there. Also, if you ever heard of, I think Keith Carradine, the whole David Carradine, they're like one of they're like his grandfather is one of these guys. Also, Andy Devine, who appears with John Wayne in The Shootist, is there. It's a whole, these are definitely some of the very early stars of the Western genre. Actually, rewatching the scene, it's actually much more exciting than I originally remember it. Okay, so we just talked about the Stagecoach, which is John Wayne, launching the Western genre in the sound era. This was 1939. The next film is, my number 2 film is The Searchers, which is John Wayne at the, sort of at the peak, at the height of his evolution of telling the same story over and over again. Telling the same types of stories. One of the reasons is that the John Wayne character is much more introspective in this film, or the film is introspective about him. Rather, he takes a while to become introspective. The basic plot of the film is a rather complex one. John Wayne is a man who would probably qualify as bigoted. He fought for the Confederacy and still has an oath towards the Confederacy. He also definitely does not like Native Americans. And this mirrors the fact that John Ford, despite being very helpful to, I believe it was the Navajo Nation in real life, did not do much to portray Indians as anything more than, like, video game characters to be shot down. So, he has a character, see, this is John Ford, hopefully you can hear him, he's yelling, and he's not a man who has it all together. I cannot remember what's happening in this movie. I was going to pause to... That's young Natalie Wood there, who, you might know from the Miracle at the 34th Street West Side Story, Rebel Without a Cause, or that unfortunate boating accident that I think no one ever knows what will happen with it. In any case, so this John Wayne character really does not like Indians. And he had a girlfriend before he went to fight for the Confederate Army, but then the girlfriend married his brother, but he's still close to them because it's the only family they have, and old girlfriend slash sister-in-law and her brother adopted a guy played by Martin Pauly, if I'm not mistaken, is his name, who is kind of the second, you'll see his name, and then I'll know what his name is. Jeffrey Hunter, okay, sorry. Martin Small, I think, was the character's name. And that's the sister-in-law, and that's Ward Bond, who's been in a lot of movies. And they go on a search for the niece who was kidnapped by the Indians. And John Wayne's prejudice and the idea of his adopted nephew. Let's pause for a second. I'm sorry, I'm being a little bit babbly with the plot summary, but it's a complex plot. So his adopted nephew is like 1/4 or 1/8 Indian, and the Comanche Indians, and so he has to reckon with a lot of doubling, a lot of the fact that the hero incarnate, the protege of him, the only surviving family member who's not imprisoned by the Comanches, is kind of part Comanche, and that he is on a search, hence the title The Searchers, to rescue his niece, who, for all we know, might have been assimilated, to be more symbolic, sexually penetrated by the Comanches, and he has to reckon with that if that's worth rescuing for. And that sort of transition is really kind of a large commentary on the moral center of kind of, or the moral challenges personified of what the Western, of kind of the Western hero is. It's sort of like the blind spots, exactly. The law and orders that the hero creates is at the expense of the Indians. The civilization that we're trying to create is at the is it a civilization away from the Indians, away from the wilderness, because the Indians are sort of aligned symbolically in a dichotomy with the wilderness, whereas the settlers who come after, whether they're Mexican or white, are aligned with civilization. So let's move on to my favorite film. This is High Noon. This is a film that stars Gary Cooper as Marshal Will Kane, and it is definitely the epitome of the law and order Western. It is about a shootout, and it is a film that is shot in real time, just like 24. Go figure. Like it's about a marshal's last day on the job because he's about to get married, and there is a man who's coming after him, and there is Grace Kelly and Katie Gerardo, who the film employs a lot of doubling. So Katie Gerardo is his ex-girlfriend, and Grace Kelly, who is dressed in white, is a pacifist, contradiction to this Katie Gerardo character. One is staying on the train, and one is leaving the train, and that is, and it deals with questions of the necessity of violence and the costs of taming the wilderness, but it's essentially about a man who is dead. No, there's actually an alive man. I'm just kidding. It's about a man who attempts to do the right thing, and no one is willing to do it. No one is willing to join in the fight. This is an allegory, according to the producer Stanley Kramer and the director Fred Zinnemann, and I believe Gary Cooper also felt this way, about the need for unity of the Hollywood community in the wake of the Red Scare, where certain high-profile and people below the line members of Hollywood were losing their jobs because they wouldn't go along with McCarthyism and wouldn't, pledge that they were never a communist, or they took the fifth on the stand. This is also a film where our hero, Will Kane, as you can see here, shows himself to be great in so many ways. He's an able gunfighter, but he's also a man of principle. If I'm not mistaken, in this scene, I think he is going to rescue some cattle, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. By the way, this gunfight scene is also one of the remarkable things about it, because it's the Main Street shootout, and it's something that did not come along before this. Even in movies that portrayed the gunfight at the OK Corral, you didn't really see shootouts that were just like this, where it was, two people walking down the street, that it's been parodied and mocked all over the place. But this thing was certainly a game changer throughout its gun battle. And now we're seeing this guy. I don't remember him shooting him. I don't know what's up with that. Did you see him actually pull the trigger? And if I'm not mistaken, he stops to save the animals. Also, the theme was sung by the father of John Ritter, the Jack Tripper from Three's Company. And Tex Ritter was his name, and written by Dimitri Tomlin. And it was definitely one of the most memorable songs in film, and was used as a hotspot. See, there's a lot of cleverness in this gunfight scene. Right now, he shoots a lantern to smoke him out, and now. See, this is where Will Kane saves the animals. There are so many things that this film does right, especially Gary Cooper, and Gary Cooper also has the same connections to his nemesis, Frank Miller, played by Ian McDonald. And, anyway, it seems like it would be a spoiler to give away the ending to you, and I'm already at the 21-minute mark, if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the fact that I now have a tripod with which to make my film straighter. And I look forward to showing you more westerns as well as more other films, and perhaps this trailer commentary is a new feature of mine. Don't forget to subscribe to my Patreon to be more educated about films in an entertaining manner. Have a great day.